We'll start by doing a running stitch. We're going to come up through the back. We're not going for perfection. We want a visibly mended look. So come up through the back, down through the front. Up through the back, down through the front. The stitches don't have to be even. Leaving a little bit of a gap. This is a great starter stitch. Don't worry if something's a little wonky, because it looks handmade, artisan, and that's what we're going for there. I'm going to tie off now and we'll do another stitch. Let's do a diagonal stitch now. I'm going to come up through the back and down through the front diagonally. You're going to offset your stitch. And when you come up through the front again, you can try to line up with the point of this last stitch that you did. And down through the front, lining up with the previous stitch. Come up through the front and down through to the back. This is a great foundational stitch. You can do a lot of different stitches with this and build on this. That stitch was getting a little bit short. You can see that we're kind of leaning there, so take a little bit longer one. Up through the front, down through the back. Up through the front, down through to the back. Down through the back. We'll take one last stitch, and now let's create a V stitch. So we've ended that stitch. We're going to come up through the front, the beginning of that last stitch, and then down through to the back at the bottom of the previous stitch. So this is a V-stitch variation that you can do. It creates a zigzag. So you can see where that slanted stitch that you just did is a great foundation to build on. And if you want it to end the way that you had started it, then you could just do another one at the very end so that the two ends match. And that is a zigzag stitch. So now in the break between those two stitches, we're going to come up through the back using our slanted stitch. We're going to slant. You can go either direction, whatever direction you want to go. Come up to the back beside that last stitch that you did. Do another slanted stitch. Come up through the back. Slant your stitch. So now you can see how you can take a straight running stitch and add slanted stitches to it to create a whole new stitch. We'll tie off on the back and we'll start another stitch. So I've done another series of running stitches. We're going to end with one last running stitch. And now, rather than doing slanted stitches, we're just going to do like a little bar tack in between the stitches. This stitch is featured in the drawings of the stitch library in your booklet. And you can do wide or narrow. You could also do different colored thread for the bar tack if you wanted. That would also be really interesting. So you can see how that running stitch is a really great foundation for doing lots of other creative stitches. And there you have it, another creative running stitch with an added bar tack. Now let's do a V-stitch. So we're going to come up through the front, down through the back, up through the front, down through the back to create a V. Create a little gap in between. This is a variation on your slanted stitch that we did in the zigzag, and I don't know what you want to call this one. I just think it kind of looks like pine needles. You can even do them closer together if you wanted. Let's see that. Here's some closer ones. So now we're getting to the end. You can see how it looks a little bit different with the V stitches closer together. These are all variations that you can do on your Thread-scapes. So we'll go ahead and tie off here and get ready for another stitch from your stitch library. Let's do some background stitches. I call this seed stitch. So essentially you're just taking a small little stitch and you're going to go different directions with this stitch. You want lots of variations, so think of if you were just scattering seeds and how they would be landing in all different directions. Some closer together than others. I like to do these for what would maybe be the background of a sky or even sand, just to add some variation, some texture. You could do different colors. You could start out with a lighter pearl cotton or thread, and then add in 2 or 3 other colors, a medium and light. So you can just see I'm just randomly coming up through the front, down through to the back in different directions. Easy peasy. You totally got this. You can do this. Now let's do a French knot. So you come up through the back, and I'm right-handed, so with your left hand, wrap your thread around your needle 3 times, go down just beside your thread, and pull through. Come up through the back, wrap 3 times, go right next to your stitch, and gently pull through. Up through the back, 1, 2, 3, just off to the side of your stitch. I'm going to show you a variation of this French knot that I like to make the knot a little bit more robust here in a second. Okay, there you go, French knot. Now we're going to do a variation on that French knot. We're going to come up through the front, wrap 3 times like we did before, come down next to where we came up through to create our French knot, and then we're going to add a chain stitch next to it. So we're going to come up next to our French knot, hold the thread off to the left, go back down through the back while holding the thread, and we're going to create a loop. This is also called a chain stitch if you were to use it by itself, but we're using it in a combination with the French knot. We're going to come up next to the knot, but inside the loop, and then we want to gently tighten the loop and then come down through the front on the other side of that loop to hold it in place. And you can see that it makes the French knot a little bit more dynamic. I really like this stitch. I think that it could be used in a lot of really interesting ways. You could do it in a chain where you put one next to the other. So there's a French knot. We're coming up through the back, creating our loop for what would be, if it was by itself, we would call it a chain stitch. Hold the loop down with your left hand, come up next to the French knot, but inside the loop, and gently tug it so that it nests around the knot, and then stitch the loop in place. Well, we kind of buggered that up. There, we kind of fixed it. Let's do another one. Well, let's do one that's right next to it so you can see what that looks like. So we're going to pretend like this is the center. So we're just going to be up a little bit from where we want it to connect. Wrap 3 times, create our French knot. Come up next to our French knot. Create our loop. Come up next to the French knot to catch our loop. We're inside the loop. Just gently tighten it, holding it down, and then on the outside, pin that little chain stitch down in place. And do another one. You can see how they kind of connect together, creating like almost like a bead, only with thread. So there you have it. Another dynamic French knot with a little chain stitch around it, creating more dimension. We'll go on to our next stitch. So another background stitch that I like to do is just a plain X. So we'll come up through the top, down through to the back, and then up through the back, down through the front, and create a little X. Very easy. This just builds on some of the stitches that we've done earlier. You can do them all different ways to create texture and randomness. This is a great background stitch. You can do them small, you can do them big. Let's do, after this one, we'll do a larger one. And these are just ideas for you to build on to create your own interesting background for your Thread-scapes. And don't be afraid if they're a little wonky like that. I think it adds character to your piece. Gives it an artisan quality. And do a combination of bigger ones and smaller ones. So there you have it. Just an X stitch. Now we'll go on to the next stitch. Let's do a variation on a satin stitch. So a satin stitch is just where you're taking stitches and putting them side by side. But for interest, what if we were to do them side by side? And I'm going to leave a little bit of gap, and I'll show you why. And make them different lengths. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in between some of these. So I'll do a couple and then come up in between the two and maybe not make the stitch length as tall, so it gives us some randomness. Gives us a little bit more texture on that upper edge. You can see there. I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap there. I'm going to take a few stitches here. Oh, that one's kind of wonky. Okay, now what I'm gonna stop here. Now I'm going to add a different color in there. Give us a little bit of texture. You could even do this with, I'm using highly contrasting threads so that you can see it, but you can create a lot of movement and texture just by shifting to a thread that is slightly lighter or darker, and play up some shadows with this technique. And again, just going high and low with those satin stitches. Completely up to your interpretation. So don't be afraid to combine stitch threads with your different stitches in the stitch library. Now we'll move on to the next stitch.